What's up everyone, how are you all? Today we are back with another blazing Naruto story. What if Naruto made a deal with a god sealed in the moon? If you enjoy, then please like, share and do comments. And also check the description box to original creator of this beautiful creation. Among the infinite frontier of the galactic skyline of the moon, something broke its fragile atmosphere. And a sound barrier was shattered. It crashed against the ground, stirring up a great deal of lunar dust. It scattered instantly as the divine figure positioned itself with a shit-eating grin. "I've finally found you," the cold being straightened with a frighteningly chill demeanor. To cut the glass and atoms surrounding his graceful form of respect and holy. From the abyssal side of space and its canyons of stars, he descended in no short of a truly carefree manner. His head hung ever so high as he gently kissed the silver horizon with his sandal. Dust stirred and rocks floated before gently settling snug towards the holy marble they tied themselves to as the being presented itself. The entity itself was bleach white, with wide, pure white eyes, in a snow-white, long-sleeved suit with a sectioned apron over it, along with a pale sash. Grayish-blue unkempt short, spiky hair capped into a ponytail. A light brown horn broke up the monotonous bleaching of white, grew from the back of his head and wrapped around to his forehead with a small gap in between them, threatening his clipped eyebrows. "It took quite a while to find you, Lord Toneri Otsutsuki," the man of white preached mockingly with a slight chuckle. "You've finally appeared, celestial being." The one known as Toneri winded out, standing at an attention of preparedness against any threatening motion. "Stiff and ready. Come now, why stand on formality? We are from the same clan." The celestial being giggled, sounding less like humor and more like amusement. "I thought the Otsutsuki clan's fate was going to end with me." "Quite the contrary. The main family of the Otsutsuki clan does not feel that way." "The main family?" Toneri had to double-take at that. The idea of other celestial beings made destiny seem less certain. It made his destiny all the less contentful. If they really exist, then why did they forsake us for 1,000 years? He said in intrigue and a hint of rage. "We saw everything. The incident involving the girl with the Byakugan was quite unfortunate." The being spoke with a regal elegance present on nobility. Those who view themselves higher than others in a fake totem pole of creation. Most of all though, the mocking was but a facade. Toneri could sense where this conversation was heading, and fast. This was not an ally. "You endured such humiliation, and yet you still continue to risk your life for that planet. Everything seemed so still, where sound feared to tread. I really do have to hand it to you, however, this means you're betraying the plan." His smile dropped, to a look of an arrogant blank expression, with his lips moving ever so little up in the form of the light, devious smirk. "You believe you've made the very first move because of what you've done to that woman's son, but that was very hastily prepared. You act like you know everything, but you never came until today. What would you know about that planet?" Toneri sprinted at the man of white, shattering what little barrier of sound was present upon the lunar object's surface. Imprinting the surface with each step, his robe moving with him elegantly. He projected his palm into a spear-like motion, threatening the stab through the celestial thread with a might unrivaled. This man could not reach Earth. The being's face curved into that same grin. "You're right, I don't know." Toneri felt something strike through his back, his spine, the red glow of a skinny beam of energy cutting into his back and barbing itself against his skin, his will. All his momentum shattered to a fault as he stopped right in front of the visitor. His muscles spasming and eventually stopping all motion. "And that is exactly the reason we were dispatched here." "We?" he barely smutted out. The being made little reaction to Lord Toneri's efforts of struggle, leaving only a condescending smirk. "Well, let's leave it at that. Now about this fight, I'm up for it." Space distorted and crawled in shatters across the being's hand as it pulled out a black box. The distortion disappeared swiftly afterwards, the box holding an ominous, oddly stationary chakra. Then he dropped it. The box clattered awake as a dust-like substance, not unlike the stirred-up ancient soil could muster. It spread towards Toneri's legs. They began to crystallize, his skin and outfit going from its solemn celestial white to obsidian color as he felt the molecules surrounding him stop all motion. The energy remained, but they simply refused to abide by his will or his intent. It just stopped. Even his chakra failed to move. A time freeze? Realized in slight shock. The being floated back away from Toneri a few feet away from him gently. I don't actually have authorization to kill a member of the clan. So don't worry, just enjoy your stay at the palace of the Dragon King for the next 10,000 years. He looked up at the blue world of opportunity. The time seal converging across his form like glass being shattered and remade over and over again. Alright then, it's time I get to reel in a big catch. He giggled mischievously as Toneri looked at him in horror. No. The being from the stars jumped back into the vacuum of space, the void beyond the surface of the moon. Grinning sadistically. Stop. As his presence vanished, Toneri lost all feeling in his body, his mind slowing to a fault as the crawl of the dragon seal trapped in place, his expression a muddy outlook as he telepathically reached his thoughts outward. Boruto isn't strong enough just yet. His mind began drawing to a startling halt. Boruto? Said boy looked up at the sky, the wind catching past his cheery blonde hair zoomed. Placing a hand over his right eye, he felt an odd feeling. As if something had just gone terribly wrong. It reminded him of after the war. Before he was capable of doing something to help, to defend, to fight, just anything. He had been a boy before, but now as a man, he felt as helpless as he had before. With his only company to his reach. Puppets, they fed and looked after his growth and development. But they lacked the necessary principles to be not just an organic creature, but a sentient one capable of emotions, wisdom, and judgment, and at the end of their day, they were all played by him. What had he learned? The absence of warmth? The idea of his skin feeling nothing more than the coldness? Among the loneliness and desolation, what more could he become from the seclusion? Destiny? He thought it meant doing something big, something necessary and important for the good of all. Like hurling the moon at the earth. It was necessary. He got punched across its surface by Naruto for that folly. And then he lost his eyes, which did little but deprive him of joyous sights. It opened his mind to a bigger picture, with the fallout of his existence, and his grandmother Kagaya. He wasn't the only god? And if they had reached the same, if not worst, conclusion as he had before? What was stopping potentially stronger beings from laying waste to humanity? It would have to be Boruto. It would have to be that next generation. So he blessed Boruto with an enhanced foresight, an enhanced skill so unique it troubles the gods themselves. Now unable to move, unable to feel anything, unable for his senses remained ever closed for the rest of countless millennia. Unable to sit by and accept that Boruto might be destroying his destiny at a moment's notice. That the world may be over. The most he could do now was pray. That the shinobi could defeat the gods. That Naruto and Sasuke were ready to give everything. They were stronger than him after all, they might be able to figure it all out. Perhaps it would do him no good to worry over events he had no more place in. He failed to see the full picture before, so hopefully his view wasn't as bleak as he had first thought. So he sat and waited as he usually had, only under the circumstances of being held against his will. To watch, for another 9,000 years. Bearing witness but nothing more than to the absence of light itself. As the planet from his eyes never even shifted a single unnatural flick. He retrospected, he mumbled, he meditated, he thought, he relearned, he panicked, he relaxed, he cried, he relaxed again, and then he grew restless to leave. But finally it cracked. After 9,000 years, time seemed to resume its natural order as in a few blinks he regained billions of memories at once. The final 1,000, the dust flew back as he moved from the cracks of history into the corporeal realm. Again the sound of glass accompanying his escape. His foot stomped against the moon's surface as light peered. He stumbled slightly. He stood for a few moments in retrospective freedom, before a more pressing thought occurred to the Guardian. He took a few steps and found himself moving, before he flew off in a hurry. No time for words, no time for reaction, no time to process. Only worry took his form as he almost felt like he was sweating. The earth was still there. After 10,000 years, they failed, but what did that mean? Did Naruto and Sasuke win? Did Boruto fulfill the prophecy? He flew all the way towards the world of Lapis and Emerald, breaking the sound barrier and blitzing past the atmosphere's skin. His skin igniting his white figure as he blurred past and towards the nearest settlement, before he came to halt. Something was off. The gravity didn't feel the same coming in. But that shouldn't be possible? Should it? Could it be an asteroid? No, if it were there would be more energy and rupture stirring in the air. He rushed backwards and upwards, high into and above the atmosphere. He overlooked it as the beautiful blue orb was drowned by the sun's steed. He felt the radiation brush against his skin as the heat swelled around him comfortably. He turned to face the moon's direction. Oh my! Toneri stood still, perfectly still, gazing at the lunar light and stars in front of him. He absorbed the emptiness before him, his senses unable to deceive him. The light enveloped him, turning him into a mere shadow. I will destroy the world of the Sage of Six Paths. Quote, the land of the moon shinobi. The branch family of the celestial beings, gone. I vow the moon will never approach the earth, never again. His home, completely and utterly gone. The silence was almost unbearable, stretching for what seemed like millennia. Toneri felt like a shadow of his former self as he realized the extent of the moon's devastation. He clenched his fists. How is this even possible? Toneri's blank expression masking a multitude of emotions at this point: rage, confusion, and an overall offensive concern of a feeling. Was this a gift from the celestial beings? A consequence of a battle involving Naruto or Sasuke? Did Boruto do this? It was a miracle the fragments didn't crash towards the earth, or at least the ones he could see, if this was any indication. It seemed the earth perhaps won, shown more so as the cost. If the moon was the first indicator, then this. What more was lost? Somehow, against all odds, there had been no major damage to Earth. But how many lives were lost? How many cities destroyed? How many dimensions left barren? How many stray souls would he feel if he were to touch the land of this new world? Did it even matter now? The fight was done. Or was it? Did the Otsutsuki wait for him to return, only to vaporize the planet? Or parade around the children he swore to protect everyone? Toneri felt shaken down to his soul. His failures piled up on top over him one by one by one. But he withdrew his emotions. If they overcame him now, he'd be no better than the invaders. He'd be no better than himself. If he were to fix this travesty, he would need assistance. Before he had the help of the 7th Hokage. But just because he's history doesn't mean the 9 tails is. If he has a tailed beast, even just one, he may be able to fix the moon's orbit. He just needed to find them. The planet is still there, the tailed beast should still be able to exist. Kurama might have been the strongest of them, but even Shukaku would wield the chakra necessary to help him, if not the one tail, then perhaps all the other tailed beasts. He was sure one of them could help him. Their forms of chakra, or chakra monsters, can't be killed without destroying the very essence of chakra itself, something an Otsutsuki could replicate with ease if need be. The Biju were mighty, however, and if his fight was anything to go by, a Jinchuriki was an opponent that should not be underestimated. He motioned back in the direction of the planet. He began feeling out for any of the 9 chakra monsters. But to his ever-increasing worry, he only found 5 separate energies, only reminiscent of the Biju at a glance. 2 of them seemed to be halved on top of that, muffled to a former of the power, leaving only 3 real options. The worst part was, he didn't even recognize their energy signatures. They seemed to be the strongest, but he was without his puppets, without his eyes, so he found it hard to verify if they were humans or beasts. It could even be a celestial being in disguise to snuff him out. Which begged the question, were they even Biju at all? And if so, where did the other 4 go? Why had no Otsutsuki attacked him already if it were a fake-out? They'd literally have nothing to lose. Where were the 9-tailed beasts? Where was Boruto? As far as he could tell, there were no Otsutsuki chakras, no traces. Not even the Hyuga clan, no Uchihas. Where were they? The remnants of Hagoromo's chakra. He sensed it in Naruto. Hamura? Where were Hinata's descendants? She was still related to Hamura. All the Hyuga took after him more than Hagoromo. But even at a first-hand glance from the moon, no potent strong chakra signatures, except the 5 anomalous entities. It had been 10,000 years, had the bloodlines diluted to be almost purely human? There would be at least a few eye users, or had he grown weak while stuck within the seal? Why hadn't Naruto and Sasuke freed him? He could have easily assisted against the Otsutsuki. If there were any left, I'd still be able to sense them, even if they hid in another dimension. I'm sure of that. So, where was the Otsutsuki? He opened his eyelids slightly, his darkened orbs of nothingness, lacking any true light to his sight. He wished he could peer towards the earth, to see the big blue ball and how the continents looked because, at the moment, He almost doubted it was Earth. He remembered how burning it felt. He hadn't properly cared about such sights, but now deprived of such things. He found himself feeling so dull and cold. One day, come to Earth, the female voice proclaimed. He looked upwards for minutes on end when finally he closed his eyelids. A small smile graced his features. I guess the day has come, Hinata? With seemingly no choice, he let go of his rage. There were too many unanswered questions. Questions that required further observation before coming to a solid conclusion. So he leapt from the rocky soil, jetting towards the Earth. The moon's surface received no further damage. Too many things weren't adding up. He needed a closer look. The air around him bucked and combusted as he rammed through the atmosphere and into the skyline. Dark clouds extended across as he failed to register the glorious sight. Contrasting his pale skin, lightning occasionally contacted other dark clouds. Breaking through the skyline, he came across a huge lush forest stretching for miles and miles. His pale hair danced in the wind. His ethereal movements barely made a sound as he navigated the dense forests and towering mountains of this unfamiliar land. He felt the raw humidity of it as he descended. He stopped in his tracks, feeling the weight of the earth beneath him. The surrounding purple flowers provided a sense of calm and relaxation. It has been so long. Kneeling down, he plucked one of the blooms from the ground. It felt odd to be enjoying the simple pleasure of smelling a flower, especially with the destruction of the moon and potential danger to Earth looming over him. But at this moment, everything felt peaceful and safe. As he stood on Earth, Toneri couldn't sense any signs of spacetime distortions or Otsutsuki chakra. It was strange not to feel any strong chakra signatures, even among humans like the cages. But at the same time, it was a welcome, yet alarming change. But no bloodlines, no Otsutsuki presence, anywhere. This shouldn't be possible. It was so peaceful. Not the same kind of peace as was on the moon, the kind of peace he could only feel when all was right with the world. It almost felt wrong. The moon was destroyed, the earth might be in danger. And he was smelling a flower. But he chose to savor this moment instead. Nature chakra was still around, that's nice to know. He stated in solace. And it was nice. Suddenly, a loud roar echoed through the air, causing Toneri to turn towards its source. But he sensed nothing. No chakra signature. Instead, he had to rely on his instincts. Spreading his chakra out so he could see. Only to find a peculiar yet humbling sight. Are you a bear? He asked aloud, sensing the air current shift. He swiftly dodged over the beast, landing on the ground swiftly. The beast growled and faced his direction. Toneri found it odd he couldn't sense this entity's chakra. He could feel the pressure it gave off whenever it made a move, but still. He couldn't sense any chakra from it, which surprised and shook him. All forms of life had some level of chakra within them, so how could this creature have none? Each swipe the creature took was just a touch too out of reach. Cutting down trees, smashing boulders, Toneri simply glided away from each hit with his superior speed and agility. Using his heightened senses, he practically danced around the larger creature. He landed on a branch. He finally calmed himself. He mustn't lose focus on the task at hand, whatever this creature is. The creature swept at him and he vanished from its sight. It roared again, only to find its entire form split down the middle. As the two halves fell adjacent from one another, the creature began to fade into a black mist. What an odd creature. It had no chakra, getting by purely on its physical prowess. He mused to himself in wonder. He looked off in the direction of the large chakra signature. The scent of flowers filled his nose once more, reminding him of simpler times before all this chaos began. Smiling to himself, he whispered gently, "I'll have to look into those things later." He proceeded to fly off silently. Unbeknownst to him, someone had been watching his every move. He soared through the air for a few minutes, marveling at the natural beauty of the mountains, lakes, and forests scattered across the landscape. Suddenly, a distant commotion caught his attention. He braced himself and increased his speed in the direction of negative energy. It was also the same direction as the unidentified Jinchuriki. Rushing forward, Toneri reached the outskirts of a relatively small village. The scene that unfolded before him was one of chaos and fear. Bandits, clad in rugged attire, were pillaging the town. He could smell the smoke, the blood spilled. Marauders. Toneri said in an almost disappointed tone. Prime examples of those who didn't deserve chakra. The gift from the Sage of Six Paths. He should have expected such behavior from humans, but he corrected himself. There were good and bad humans, just like there were good and bad gods. Toneri refocused on his mission. Finding the anomalous entity, this was only a disturbance. Chakra was meant to bring people together, not cause harm. If this was what was going to be done with it, he wanted no part in this senseless waste of time. The fate of the world and the moon rested on his journey. Your eye is the star of hope. The words echoed in his mind. The same words he echoed to Boruto. He couldn't just overlook this. Perhaps that was something he could do before, but if he was going to be humanity's protector, he needed to save as many as he could, with the capabilities he had in his arsenal. This town was no different. And since there was no Naruto or Sasuke, it would have to be no different. Just because he had a different goal currently, didn't mean he could forsake his duty to the innocents. He landed on the ground softly, not too similar to how he graced the earth a few minutes before. Slowly walking into the village with a hesitant step. Various life signatures flooded his senses as he honed them to within the village, and opted instead to walk through towards them as a means of truly taking in what this village had to offer. It had been too long since he experienced interaction or food or just a sense of unity in general. Brimstone and ash awaited him. The wall surrounding the village was completely shattered, the cobblestone path was fractured and sprawled. With smoke rising from what was left of it, the gate was torn and shattered as if something strong had rammed through. His optimism was replaced with an unimpressed, blank expression devoid of emotion. The silence was unnerving and undeserving, dripping with what should have been a silent and comfy night upon the dirt and stone. Witnessing the vacated vessels of people and young children only made his disgust more apparent. With the feel of slight heat and raw smoke, he could only imagine, but he didn't need to. He could just tell that bodies couldn't just remain as they were. No, it was flames that stayed. For a split second, he felt as if leaving the moon as it is would be the right thing. If these humans would continue to do such arrogant and ignorant things. The value of life was above the understanding of even him, a being who lived on the moon. Above all things beyond what could be described of the stars and heaven light exceeded. What kind of idea could these beings below get to preponderate such a self-destructive rationale? Then have the audacity to frame it as if they were in the right all along? He clenched his fists. With a heave, he calmed himself, easing his awe too, as he had practiced during that ridiculously long seal. You're falling back into old habits again. They were not perfect, must be patient. With a sigh, his fists weren't clenched anymore. His rage mellowing but not ceasing. His blank expression remained, and as the fire cackled weakly, his thoughts rang stronger than they had before. A loud vibration emanated into his ears. His eyebrow twitched. Bong, as sudden as it was to any survivors. A loud bang erupted, like a miniature explosion. He sidestepped to it perfectly. His senses gazed at the object in its glittering glory from the explosion that rocketed it. A metallic pellet, the size of perhaps a pinky finger, made its way towards him. What is this? A metal ball flying at the speed of sound. He pinches the bullet between his fingers, as if he was holding onto a flower, and observes it. All the energy had suddenly stopped as he felt the vibration in his finger. There was no chakra. No, there was something, but not the same. Incredible. An odd aura coated the bullet. The aura fades after a few more seconds of his examination of it. Could this be some sort of new jutsu? Guiding it gently in its course as he danced it back in the opposite direction, from where it stood, it moved at a much more optimal pace in his perspective. As it causes an audible pop, the ground shook slightly as the bullet cracked. To any onlooker, the bullet flew, then zoomed backwards towards the bandit that had shot it. For only a split second, a weird blur of the pale man accompanying it in a stagnant position. His face stuck in a satisfied hue. Then there was an explosion and the bandit flew out from a 3-story house, sending wood and shaking the area. The bandit fell, colliding with the rough ground of the padded village dirt. His clothes burnt as he groaned, no longer having that weird weapon in hand. Something weird occurred to Toneri's senses. Something off and natural, too strange not to notice, at least for someone like him. The shattered chakra shield flew off the rooted T. The odd part was it was visible. The bits dispersed before slowly fading into nothing. The man groaned as he attempted to get up. His eyebrows raised themselves as his mouth opened in shock. How is this possible? A physical yet spiritual force that connects all things. Chakra was the essence of all living things, connecting them to each other and the world. It was an integral part of evolution, existing within every being on Earth. Animals, plants, mountains, the sky, the ocean, every forest and jungle and desert, every island, spirits and summonings, it all held it in some form. But this human didn't. And he didn't just lack the fundamentals, he had no chakra network. It didn't matter if you were a shinobi, a samurai, or a civilian. If you didn't have chakra, you weren't alive. Even humans had chakra of some kind. Spirits and summonings also held their own as well. Yet here this anomaly was. Lacking the principles of basic chakra existence. Along with the other life form, THD negativity bear he encountered. The plants and environment still held nature chakra, so why was he an exception? What is going on? Oh shit. The man felt a force in his hand. Instantly freezing on the spot. His hand still clutching the small device that had just shocked him. As he mustered up the courage to look up, his blood turned to ice at the sight before him. It was more chilling than any monstrous Grimm he had ever encountered. That same blind man he had tried to shoot. Illuminated by the faint light of the moon. His hair and skin seemed to glow in the darkness. He looked down at the still body with a blank expression on his face, his features conveying a deep sense of melancholy dullness. For a second, he thought he was witnessing the light brother in his final moments, but the gentle nudge from the bare toes would make him think otherwise. You're going to tell me everything that is going on here. The pale figure's cold voice cut through the tense air, sending shivers down the captive's spine. Aye, do not try to deceive me. I will find out the truth one way or the other. Now speak. I won't ever sell out my tribe. With newfound resolve, straightening his back, he tried to position his hand to try and shoot the blind man. The blind man's face grew dull. From his hand, a brilliant green light burst forth. It struck the gun, then it didn't, causing it to suddenly feel lighter in his grip before shattering into pieces and falling to the ground. The bandit's surprise turned to fear as he realized he was no match for this powerful being. Your compliance was never really a factor anyway. He gradually lowered himself to the bandit, closer his hand was to his head. Before he hesitated suddenly, how would his brain react to my chakra invading it? As foul as this human was, it could backfire, resulting in a needless death in a long cycle, a preventable one, something perhaps he could relish in. But who relishes in putting down a rabid dog? Only a monster, and he wasn't like that anymore. No, I guess you're lucky I'm considerate. He moved back upwards, instead opting to quickly knock the bandit out with a kick. He could figure it out naturally. His dull expression softened, standing at attention for what was to come next. Hey, mister? A small, innocent voice pierced through the chaos. The man turned his head down gently in the direction of the voice and was met with sparkling purple eyes. A soft smile adorned the girl's face. Thank you for saving us. He smiled back at the odd little thing that shouldn't also exist yet still did. It was my pleasure, he replied, returning her smile. So are you like some sort of Magggy? A well-worn man with a droopy face rushed over, kneeling protectively beside the girl. Why did you run towards the huntsman? He asked frantically. But Poppy, you saw what he did, right? We're fine. The man found himself unable to argue with a child. His worry and fear were evident on his face. Even now, while I may be going insane, of which is no surprise, they are still humans, not things. Toneri found himself chuckling at the sight. He noticed the old man flinch. The old man grabbed the girl's hand and attempted to run back to their hiding spot in what used to be a shop. But the determined little girl held her ground. He decided he should probably intervene. You should listen to your grandfather. He knows best, you understand me? I know, but you're strong, and you're blind. Yes, I am, Toneri confirmed with a chuckle. And that's exactly why you need to follow your elder's advice. I would hate to see you caught in the crossfires of this conflict while so unprepared. She pouted, but did not refute it. She suddenly had a solemn look on her face. At that moment, Toneri found himself at a loss for what to do. He was the youngest and last surviving member of his tribe. He had no experience with children. Promise me this, he said softly, you'll look after your grandpa. Then grow big and strong to make sure your family can be safe. The girl's eyes met his or lack thereof, understanding the weight of his words. She nodded. Good, now run along, he urged her gently. She nodded again, and the grandfather, still looking astonished, gave a thankful nod before motioning for the girl to follow him back to their hiding spot. Toneri let out a sigh, feeling a mix of emotions at the encounter with the unlikely duo. There were others like them, still alive, civilian, innocent. It only infuriated him with the sight of this village. However, he kept his calm. He came here on a mission, and this was just a part of that. But he could tell, he was starting to acknowledge a part of him he hadn't had to for a long time. This mission was more than just a job. It forced him to confront a side of himself that he had long suppressed. He had always prided himself on his control and discipline, but now he found himself grappling with his own deep-seated hatred. But he knew just how bad it was to be at the mercy of his hatred, and to be ruined by it. It nearly got him killed at the end of it all before. Without that all-encompassing emotion, though, what was left of his identity? Was he simply a shell of a person, hollow and empty? These were the thoughts that plagued him as he struggled to find purpose beyond his burdened vendetta. Was this bandit lacking something, which he gained by granting the sin of violence upon others? Did he know? Did he accept this? Was he misguided? If he was to be the new celestial protector, what was he to do with such thoughts? Toneri, the gravelly voice echoed. He felt the same energy as his parents, his grandparents, his entire people, and even the Tensigan. With a hitched breath he hurled himself around. Nothing. His hand caressed his face. Am I sweating? No, he must be imagining it. He never sweated before, or since. He calmed himself once more. Breathing in and out. He must embrace his role and bear the weight of the heavens upon his shoulders. He mustn't trick himself into believing otherwise. Raven wasn't easily shaken. She was strong, agile, skilled, perhaps exceptionally lucky. She held the belief and pride that strength was a lot of things, but over the years, she learned that strength isn't everything. But information? Oh, that decided everything. The ins and outs of the village. A pretty fountain remained with burning houses stretching across it as she sat perched on a building in the center of the village, overlooking the relatively easy scuffle for dominance. Such as the 4 huntsmen who were hired to Chandra village. Stella Una's semblance is to create a blinding burst of light that can disorient and temporarily blind her enemies. This power can also be extended to her clothing and weapons, making them shine with a brilliant intensity. It is unknown if this ability can extend to others or animals. Her weapon of choice is a pair of dual blades that have the unique capability of fusing together into a semi-automatic assault rifle, capable of firing various types of dust ammunition. Onyx liming. His semblance allows him to vibrate himself or his weapons, increasing their destructive force. He can even turn an enemy's attack against them or use it to manipulate his surroundings. His preferred weapons are 2 blunt wooden maces that are also grenade launchers. Lycoris Tonga, known as the Touch of Death, possesses the rare semblance to manipulate his own body temperature, able to reach scorching hot or freezing cold levels. He can also extend this power to others, earning him his deadly moniker. Due to his high aura level, he is often able to emerge unscathed from battles. He prefers to use a common pistol that fires lightning dust rounds. Dawn Feld. Semblance is unknown. She wields an axe that utilizes ice dust in combat. It does not convert, but the axe can apparently change form. Perhaps it has something to do with her semblance, but she was relatively smart enough to avoid having it leaked. The least is known about this huntress. Forming Team Sold, despite being relatively young, they were extremely proficient and deadly fighters. Yet she held the pistol and one of their clubs. She couldn't get her hands on the others, but she'd have them soon enough. Not like they'd leave one of their own behind after all. It'd be a twisted sort of irony if it did occur. One can never tell with people. Only a few minutes ago her stomach dropped, not similar to when he first spared with her father. Or when she met her. But this wasn't exactly that. Even as she admired the handiwork on these 2 blades, she felt the pulse of nature tingle as something seemed a bit too off for her liking. Her instincts warned her of worse. Vernal, we have already gotten what we can. Tell the tribe to take what we can afford and to prepare to move out. Grimm will be here soon. If they haven't already started gathering. Without a word, her second-in-command Vernal nodded and took out her scroll to inform everyone. The device lit up and she felt a bit more at ease. The others who heard her understood, responding with a myriad of acknowledgments to her name. That was when the wind started picking up. Raven felt an ancient shift in the mood, so to speak. Her power pulsing within her warningly. The pressure dropped as the wind turned to a gust, to then a torrent. It shrouded everything. Nearby bandits went flying into walls and trees and buildings, and the fountain even. She was able to stand her ground. Albeit just barely, having to use a bit of her maiden power. No one seemed hurt. She felt her heart stricken in her chest. Her head motioned upwards. In the sky, he descended. His white kimono blazing as the fires began snuffing out, the humidity dulling to pleasantry. She grabbed Omen with practiced ease, ready to defend herself and her tribe. However, she could tell, this wasn't any of those ordinary huntsmen and huntresses. The being landed on the ground in front of the fountain as water resumed flowing out from it. No shoes. The white kimono was simple, elegant, and unassuming. He moved as if he carried a weapon, however, she couldn't spot any. The man's eyes were closed, with skin so pale it genuinely made her think of a Schnee. The shaggy white hair and the heavily defined facial features. He looked younger than her. Yet her power pulsed in her. The only time it ever did this. She couldn't tell before, but now she could. The silence stretched between them, heavy and tense. A lone figure stood before Raven Bronwyn. Finally, the figure spoke with a voice that seemed to echo from the depths of a cavern. "You're the chieftain." Raven Bronwyn. Raven remained silent, her eyes narrowed as she studied the stranger before her. She could feel the weight of their gaze upon her, searching for any signs of weakness or hesitation. "Do you not wish to speak?" The figure pressed on. "Are your actions causing you grief? Guilt?" Raven's grip tightened on the hilt of her sword as she bristled at the questions. Who was this person to question her? And why did their presence fill her with such unease? "Who are you?" she demanded, her voice laced with a hint of danger as she gripped her weapon. "I am Toneri," came the reply smoothly, his tone confident and self-assured. "I require your assistance." His words hung in the air, heavy with mystery and intrigue. "Assistance? Yes. For what exactly, or can I even ask?" She stared with an unwavering look, her stance unyielding. The blind man looked at her as he settled onto the earth. The tornado died down to a sly stream of air as he made contact with the concrete floor of the torn village. The sight made Raven all the more wary as she further analyzed this new threat. Skin as white as the clouds, and a robe to match it. Vernald took one look and knew the protocol. Let Raven handle it. Ordering everyone accordingly, whether it was one of her minions or not wasn't of concern. In her world, it was fall in or be left to die. The weak perish and the strong thrive. That was their way. Toneri's expression remained unchanged. Inwardly, however, he stricken and froze at that line. A certain part of his brain twitched at the mere utterance of disrespect. "You will listen or I will." He paused suddenly, his tone softened. A sort of contemplative look came over his features. He sighed silently, composing himself. "No, I shall explain my purposes here clearly." Her weapon remained sheathed, yet her posture was defensive, ready to draw at a moment's notice. Her hand lingered near the hilt of her half-sheathed sword. As Toneri looked gazer at her without a set of eyes, she maintained a steady, glareful sort of front that betrayed her turmoil. "Why do you need my help?" "To restore the moon." His voice held a tint of longing to it that Raven picked up on. However, that didn't change how absurd the statement was. Silence fell on loud ears as anyone within earshot stared at him. "The moon? Yes, the moon. The moon. I am not jesting. I didn't say you were." "I am aware," he replied with calm certainty. A brief silence followed. "I see the power you wield. I merely seek your assistance." Raven's eyes widened. She was aware he was after her, but to say aloud so bluntly without fear. With what he's displayed, he couldn't be one of her henchmen. He was a different sort of threat. "This could be my way to defeating her. This being, we might have a chance, as insane as he is. I will help you, but under a few conditions." She let the words stew in the air. Toneri remained unmoved, his expression unchanged. "You will not harm me or my tribe. In return, I will aid you. Cease your attacks. No more raids. You will live peacefully." Raven suppressed a chuckle at the notion of peace. Such ideals felt detached from the harsh realities she knew. People die, they die every day. But clearly, Toneri was unlike anyone she had encountered. His demeanor was serene yet powerful, as if he could easily crush her but chose not to. "I agree to your terms, but you must provide us with protection, food, and water." That was the way of strong take what they need from the weak. Raven believed this. By stating her demands, she was testing him against her worldview. Yes, Toneri was indifferent. Before she can respond, a green ball of light manifested from the palm of Toneri's hand. It cast a shadow over the palm and the surroundings of where the light touched. As it descended to the ground, a tree sprouted, growing rapidly from the concrete. Its wood twisted and expanded until it matched Toneri's height. He placed his hand on its bark, and the tree bloomed with flowers. It was swift, it was effortless, it was almost unreal. With merely a seed, I can create a tree bearing fruit. As for water, he looked at the sky. It was eerie, he was even looking yet he knew where exactly to look. I can draw moisture from the clouds, summon the rain at will. There is little I cannot achieve on earth. Raven's steely gaze betrayed her inner turmoil as she considered his proclamation. He spoke with unwavering confidence, bordering on arrogance. Then why not make it rain now? I believe it's unnecessary as I have already manipulated the wind. However, he raised his hand slightly. If you doubt my ability to manipulate water, you will be mistaken. His expression remained impassive, like a force of nature. Like her, I need time to consult with my tribe. He lowered his hand. I will wait. However, he paused, his face briefly tensing. If you attempt to flee, I will know. And I will find those who think they are hidden. One thought crossed her mind as she signaled her men to stand down. This thing can't be human. She nodded, before making a hand gesture. And backing off. Toneri sensed that around 8 people had surrounded him. You can sense my presence, she said with a hint of intrigue. And everyone else in the village. I see. When I return to this spot, I will be ready to discuss further. Don't keep me waiting then. Bronwyn, chieftain, I understand your hesitation, but with your powers, you don't have to worry about us. You have the seasons at your whim and call. He is just a man. No, but chieftain, Vernal. Her eyes sparked with lightning, a warning that froze Vernal in place. Raven sat down, placing a hand on her temple and massaging it vehemently, as if to steady her thoughts. After a moment, she looked directly at Vernal. We cannot defeat him, not by force or flight. Her voice, though calm, carried the weight of an irrevocable truth. Do you really believe that's true? He could be lying for all we know. What semblance can manipulate nature on such a scale? Raven's question cut through Vernal's doubts, her tone cool and precise. It could be a semblance. Vernal. The sharpness in Raven's voice silenced her. Think carefully. What semblance is that powerful, with so little drawbacks? I don't know, but enough. Leave. The air became thick with annoyance. Her eyes found Omen resting lightly on Raven's lap. Vernal remembered vividly how Raven dealt with those who defied her. As the Spring Maiden, her power was formidable, rivaled by only a handful of people in the world. To her, Raven was one of the strongest beings she could think of, almost mythical in her powers. Yet here she was, contemplating the capabilities of a blind man who seemingly commanded the very elements that she so did. He did mention the moon. Could he really have journeyed from there to Remnant, blind? The thought lingered, making Vernal question the true nature of this man from the moon. She exited the chieftain's tent, leaving Raven to ponder. Humanity held 2 sides to it. One was the ability to commit great acts of kindness upon the world or themselves. The other was a propensity for self-destructive violence, often in pursuit of petty squabbles. He sighed as the distant sounds of argument reached him, his senses alert to the entire village's clamor. Even from across the settlement, his awareness remained acute. Well, what was left of it at least? With a swift motion, Toneri reappeared at the makeshift camp within the city's ruined hall, now repurposed as shelter for the attack survivors. I must gather more information about this world. Ever since he arrived, things weren't adding up. Since his arrival, discrepancies have baffled him. Raven's power resembled natural energy yet was distinct from chakra, hinting forces unknown to even the Otsutsuki clan. The humans possessed aura, akin to chakra cloaks, but their origins and mechanisms eluded him, then mentionable thoughts of semblances. Unfortunately, the bandit from before possessed an unsatisfactory level of information about these relatively recent developments. However, one thing did cause his heart to beat. It wasn't the humans. I'm trying to organize everything to make sure we have enough food to last us until Mistral sends some help. Well, guess what? That's not going to happen. What do you mean? The old man seemed to age. His face drooped even more. Because my scroll is fucking fried. Oh no. So no outside help, we're on our own. With the motherfucking Brahmins surrounding us, and whatever the hell Toneri is. He saved us, the old man countered, as fucking if. How do we know he isn't in cahoots with Miss Murderbird? The old man became silent. I don't know about you, Gramps, but I don't buy the whole priest look. Now I don't know where on Remnant he crawled out of, but it sure ain't somewhere the sun. Why are you quarreling? His voice held a calm, commanding tone. Toneri materialized almost instantly, silencing the man's complaints. Price, with a deep gash on his cheek and a torn, dirty shirt depicting a blue-jointed metal figure, shrank back. We weren't fighting. I'm sorry if it came off that way. I see. Toneri's voice sounded skeptical. Price's demeanor collapsed further. I apologize. After a few seconds of silence, Toneri spoke again, softer. Your frustrations are understood. However, remember that I can hear you. Price looked at him, suddenly mute and blank-faced. Toneri's words settled into his mind. Suddenly, Price fell to his knees. I'm so sorry. Toneri sighed at the display. You are forgiven. Stand. Price rose quickly, collecting himself after a few seconds. Where's your scroll? And the messenger hawk? The old man and Price exchanged confused looks. The parchment. He elaborated to further silence. Before Price's eyes lit up. Oh, you're blind. Can you even? I perceive the metal sheet in your hand, Price. A scroll should be paper, with quill and ink, a crafted message. How could such a device replace that? Price stared at Toneri, dumbfounded. Seriously? You've never seen a scroll before? You didn't hit your head or something? Holy shit, it's a true hick. I am well, Price, Toneri replied, his voice carrying a subtle edge despite his unchanged expression. Well, to give a crash course. A scroll. He opened it, much to Toneri's shock, is a device for texting, calling, games, and reading aura levels. Yeah, no, basic stuff. Basic? This is astonishing. I see. So, it is primarily a communication device. Yes, I understand. Thank you for explaining. I must learn more about this texting later. Yeah, issue is the scroll signal isn't strong enough. It can't connect the nearest tower. We're completely isolated. He put the scroll into his pocket. So, it's practically useless except for playing games or aura readings. Aura. He had to hold back the questions for now. Only the great sage knows if that bandit knew something actual cognizant from what he skimmed. He was practically navigating blindly. Thank you, Price. Your efforts are appreciated. Go rest. Thanks, but first I want some food. We need to conserve supplies. The elder protested. Here, Toneri produced an apple out of his robe, floating it into Price's hand. Price merely stared at the fruit, then back at Toneri. Did you just have that in there, or? I can retrieve it if it is unwanted. Thank you, Toneri, sir. Price hurried to his tent, dust kicking up behind him. That troublemaker never changes, but perhaps it's understandable. Toneri turned to him. What do you mean? His parents abandoned him. He was practically raised by the village. Of course not everyone took kindly to him, but many helped him. I see. His voice noticeably softened, something that did not fail to catch the elder's eye. Toneri. A high-pitched voice etched in his ears. You're back. Yes, Maggie, I'm back. Is she awake? His voice softened as he addressed the child. The huntress is waking up. Finally, some answers. Thank you, Maggie. Let's go greet her. Maggie nodded, taking his hand and leading him to a tent. She waved to her grandpa with a slight smile. He entered the tent steadily, the light glazed his silhouetted form. I brought him. The little girl beamed with pride, but he could tell that something else was bothering her. Good job, Maggie. Now, please go and check on your other young friend, Kenji, was it? Kenta. Yes. Kenta, please check on him. She nodded and bolted out the door. However, Toneri noticed her smile, which was by no means fake, wasn't conveying her true emotions. I'll have to check on her before I go. Toneri turned his attention to the room's occupants. Sparse but sufficient, it contained a bed, a desk, and a chair, of which he grabbed from the various offices in the hall and the surrounding houses. On the bed lay a woman, missing a hand and with an eye wrapped, her skin fair and her eyes of twilight. Beside her sat a man whose hair reminded Toneri of the Uchiha boy, the reincarnate of Indra. Though his eyes were split between icy blue and bloody orange, he wore a black jacket over a yellow shirt. Toneri greeted them. Lycoris, how is your friend? I'm all right, she responded, attempting to sit up. Toneri observed her from all four of his senses. You are not well. Moving will only risk further harm. You should remain still. Are you a doctor? How long? Listen to him, Don. He saved us, he's not an enemy. Lycoris's voice was uncharacteristically subdued. Dawn, in her short-lived career as a huntress, has never seen Lycoris give in to someone else's demands. He was a free spirit, did what he wanted on his terms. Accustomed to Lycoris's defiance, was taken aback. She relaxed back onto the pillow, and Toneri continued. As introductions were interrupted, I am Toneri. You were trapped under debris, and I rescued you. Lycoris mentioned you are a team of hunters tasked with defending this town. A dark shadow came over her features. If you seek to apologize, this is not the time. You did all you could against a formidable opponent and survived. That is commendable. Are you saying I should be grateful? Dawn replied with growing rage. Your survival means you can continue to protect and support others. You did save lives. Look outside the tent. Look at Maggie. He let the words stir in the air. You tried. That alone is honorable. Now, you must rest. My friends are dead, and you are alive. The tone shifted heavily. The room felt as if it would collapse under an unspoken weight. Dawn, please stop. Lycoris, just stop. We're hurt too, but we can't let it break us. This is part of our duty. We were prepared for this. Your friend speaks wisdom. I apologize if my earlier words seemed harsh. No, I'm sorry. It's just, Onyx, Stella. Toneri glanced at both of them. He fought back a sigh. I will give you time. Call for me when you are ready to speak. Lycoris merely nodded as he gripped Dawn's hand. My questions will have to wait. Out of a supposed 427 people who once lived in the village, only 12 survived. Most of those 12 being injured. The Bronwyn tribe had effectively reduced this town to near extinction. To some, it was a small tragedy, to others, a monumental loss. But to him, it was an unsettling reflection of humanity's enduring savagery. Even after 10,000 years. He spoke aloud as he surveyed the destroyed village. This had been his last journey for any survivors, he found none. He floated through the desolate remains of the village, his blind eyes closed to a world devoid of color, seeing with senses far beyond the ordinary to perceive such things. Finding little of value among the ruins, searching through the homes felt disrespectful, and the library had been reduced to ashes, leaving him with two options. Speak with the survivors for info or confront Raven Bronwyn, a seasoned killer. Neither prospect appealed to him. All the killing, all that depraved murder and sinful acts. He couldn't believe humanity was still so ignorant in the grand scheme of its own actions. He had withheld every urge to purge that man he had mind read from existence upon a slight glimpse at some of his actions. The concept of aura intrigued him, a manifestation of one's soul. It seemed familiar yet fundamentally different from the chakra he once knew. Sighing, he pushed these thoughts aside. The world called Earth had changed beyond recognition. With a gentle rise, he abandoned his meditative stance in the sky. Hopefully he never had to use that power again. If he could help it. Without regulation, his chakra could overwhelm and make one brain dead. They would be alive, yet dead. It reminded him too much of that sage-forsaken seal. Being able to see, but not move, for years to decades to centuries to millennia to eons to infinity. So he didn't go too deep. He got in, grabbed the info, and left. Nothing more or less, leaving gaps in his knowledge that, in retrospect, was valuable for the opportunity. He could understand Earthling culture. He shut his eyes, he cleansed his mind. I should return to the camp, make sure they have drinkable water. Toneri. The voice, carried by the wind, broke his reverie. He turned towards the open door of the makeshift camp. The call was feminine, firm, and unmistakably Raven's. He drifted down from his position in the sky. The courtyard lay ahead, bathed in the dim light of the setting sun, casting long shadows over the broken concrete. Raven stood there, a stark silhouette against the twilight, her long black hair wild and untamed, framing a face marked by determination. No one else was present, just her. After a few seconds of silent analysis, he spoke. Raven Bronwyn, he greeted, his voice echoing with an ethereal calm. I trust you have reached a decision. I have, she replied, her tone guarded but resolved. We accept your terms. On some conditions. He raised an eyebrow, his interest piqued. And what are your conditions? She met his gaze without flinching, her eyes hard and unyielding. You can't mention my abilities in front of anyone else. Toneri considered her demands, his expression impassive. In return, I require access to your records and knowledge. Raven's eyes narrowed slightly, a flicker of confusion crossing her face. I can arrange that, she said slowly. He extended his hand towards her, the gesture deliberate and unfamiliar to him, but fitting the customs of this world. Then it seems we have an agreement. She hesitated for a moment, staring at his offered hand as if it were a foreign artifact. Then, with a decisive nod, she took it. Her grip was firm and rough, contrasting with the cold, smooth touch of his own. In that handshake, a silent understanding passed between them. Respect for each other's strengths and acknowledgement of their mutual dependence. Toneri to never underestimate her cunning, and Raven to never underestimate his power. Now that we are allies, Toneri began, his voice steady, I have a question. Go on, she replied, her tone wary but curious. Is this world called Remnant or Earth? The camp was simpler than he had imagined, reminding him of the Hyuga compound but lacking its noble grandeur. Functionality took precedence over flashiness, with a series of wooden log barriers surrounding the area. These logs stood at least 3 times the height of a normal person and were equally wide. The camp consisted of various tents and huts, bustling with life and stocked with supplies. There was also a small cluster of cages, though they were fewer in number compared to the main living area where the tribe carried on its daily routines. At the center stood Raven's tent, the heart of the camp's operations and the spot where she made her announcements. Listen up, she called out with a commanding voice. The murmuring around the camp ceased as everyone gathered in the center. Toneri counted around 62. So this is the Bronwyn tribe, the blind ghost of a man pondered to himself. This is Toneri. Some of you may recognize him from the raid on Tasuki village. We have come to an agreement. Raven paused, letting the murmurs of the crowd settle before continuing. He will be staying with us, and you will treat him with the same respect you show me. Vernal glanced nervously at Raven and back to Toneri. What are you thinking, Raven? An apathetic sigh came through, as he stepped forward. The tribe members went silent, exchanging wary glances, the tension dropping like the temperature in a blizzard. His pale hair seemed to follow the wind wherever he went, complementing his gloomy expression. The color almost dimmed in his existence. This is the same tribe that pillaged and killed dozens of towns before this one, he thought infuriatingly, but furthermore, it was replaced by hope. It overpowered his feelings on the matter. No, what good would I be if I clung to the past? No, if I could be better, so can they. The silence was maddening, the air so silent a metaphorical knife could slice it into pieces as suddenly as it would return. I am Toneri. I hope we can have a cooperative relationship going forward. He bowed and backed off, leaving Raven to finish the announcement. You are all dismissed. I want everyone to begin getting ready to deconstruct the camp. Just like that, the crowd dispersed. What is the chieftain thinking? Was that really the blind wraith? Did you just make that up? No, it's true. Shay said he moved like a blur. He doesn't even have a last name. Is he an orphan or something? I thought he was a noble? Are you sure he isn't some rich weed? I have a moniker already? I just got here. Perhaps I was a bit harsh to them, but I didn't kill any of them. The deadpan thought stowed his feelings further. Chieftain, Vernal approached Raven, her voice filled with confusion. Not now, Vernal. I will explain shortly. For now, just make yourself useful and prepare some tea. She stared at her with a look that silenced any sort of rebuttal. Before Vernal stepped down and returned to her tent, she turned to the pale man with a freshly stoic expression. You asked about my knowledge? Indeed. Follow me then. The prisoner. He shot sharply. This way. Raven led Toneri through the camp solemnly, whispers and curious glances following them. Toneri ignored the stares, his mind focused on something distant, in a world devoid of mercy. They arrived at a series of large metal cages. Toneri's attention was fixed on one in particular, remembering the brief skirmish with the huntsman Lycoris. Chieftain, one of the 2 guards greeted. Ray, Pot. She acknowledged the guards and looked at the prisoner. I trust our friend is well? She isn't going to die of blood loss anymore, but you hurt her bad. Ray responded. Barely got her stabilized without her trying to kill me, Pot added. So this is the blind wraith. He really is blind. Doesn't seem too threatening, he uttered confidently, much to Toneri's lack of a response. Pot, if you attempt to fight him, I will kill you, she replied unimpressed. I was just kidding, chef. With a sudden burst of air, the door of the cage ripped open, startling the guards. Toneri stepped inside, his movements so gentle they disrupted their concentration. The woman in the cage looked on fearfully, and Raven sensed the animosity. Toneri. Raven. His voice spoke to her instinctually, unlike when they first met, yet similar in its uncertainty. The girl lay gravely wounded from her battle with Raven, but she seemed to be healing. With bandages wrapped around her legs, arms, and hands. Her body bore scars from neck to chest, a sign of the self-healing he did not fail to notice. I am not your enemy. Stella, Toneri said gently as he knelt to her. What do you want? The girl asked, her voice trembling. I'm here to free you, your friends are worried. Her eyes softened in its incessant terror. I can't walk, you needn't fret. He placed his hand over her head. Concentrate. There was a distinct green hue emanating from it. Her eyes closed, and when she opened them, she found herself completely healed. She moved her hand, marveling at the lack of pain. Try now. She stood up, her muscles responding without ache or resistance. Ray and Pot looked astonished at the sigh. They had heard of semblances that could restore others' auras or even heal them. But the huntress was practically crippled and now she looked almost good as new. Steady yourself. Raven stepped forward. I can arrange an escort for her. That won't be necessary, give her a proper place for the time being. I'll see her back to the village personally later. Raven nodded at this, before opening her mouth. You too, get her a bath and a new bed. Then go find Vernal. Pot groaned at that. Before he could complain, Ray punched his shoulders. Yes, chieftain. Yes, chieftain. They followed into the cage and gently got the huntress back onto her feet, before taking her to another part of the camp. Raven, she had to steady her breath. Let's go somewhere more private for the other part of our discussion. Her foot buckled as she steeled herself through the chieftain's tent, the furnished floor comforting her steps as she attempted to keep pace with her brain and her heartbeat. With a soft aroma of the jasmine tea she had prepared the only comfort to her ever-worrying mind. With each step she continued, leaving nothing to the imagination as her face kept its professional exterior and nothing more. She continued towards and up the set of wooden stairs leading into the chieftain tent. Then she came into the room. Spacious and modest for a discussion to be had but private enough to reflect a rustic and utilitarian atmosphere. She hadn't heard a single word uttered before she stepped into the room, so silent it had made her pause due to its intensity. On the walls were shelves filled with assorted supplies, weapons, artifacts, and a map of the world. With a few hanging lanterns from the high and open ceiling supported by thick wooden beams that crisscross above, what wasn't covered by the light was handled by the natural light coming from the small, narrow windows set high in the walls, casting elongated shadows from where they remained. In the center of the room was a floor table, rough around the edges and heavily scarred from years of use. With two modest ornate cups situated for her steady approach. To each of the opposite ends of the table, sat the Bronwyn leader and the blind god. As she approached she batted no eye to the man or the woman as she made haste in pouring the tea for them. She moved on to the next cup. As she finished, Raven looked up at her with a grateful look. You can wait outside, thank you. Vernal nodded, placing the kettle with its ornate features, and left the tent. Raven was already reaching for the cup and sipped it gently. The entire room was filled to the brim with history and knowledge, the silence punctuated only by the occasional creak of the wooden beams and the distant murmur of activity from the rest of the camp. It is a space built for function rather than comfort, perfectly mirroring the hard, pragmatic world that Raven and her tribe inhabit. That humanity now inhabited. Were you going to tell me you sold humans? He said. Raven took note of the language for future reference. I won't do that anymore. She responded quickly. Toneri glared at her. Despite not having eyes, his gaze was felt through the presence he exuded into the room. How do I know you won't try to in the future? She sighed softly. I would have mentioned it, but I wouldn't be surprised if you had found out regardless. For that, I can only say I will never do that again. Raven continued sipping her tea. A small silence descended on the two as Toneri continued looking at her with that same gaze. You know you haven't even touched her tea. With a gentle sigh, he placed his bleached finger into the brownish tea and lifted the finger to his mouth. Upon the finger reaching his tongue, he came to one conclusion. I need to have faith, she doesn't know, you're better than you were before. Toneri thought to himself as he tried to retain his own rage, but it's the world at hand, not necessarily Raven's fault. Punishing her would be nothing more than a waste for him, especially since he needs her. This is nice. He proceeded to gently sip the tea as eagerly as Raven did, her eyes never leaving his sight as he continued. I'm glad you find it satisfactory. He suddenly placed his cup down and the small warmth that had crawled onto his face vanished. I will choose to overlook this, and trust you won't treat your fellow man in such a way ever again, Raven. You have my word. Toneri grunted softly, before drinking more of the tea. An awkward silence descended upon the two as they both enjoyed the tea. Why did you seek me out? Raven's voice cut through the profound silence. Her own impatience cut through as Toneri's own thoughts paused. That will be complicated, however, I will explain to the best of my ability. He paused for a few seconds. You hold a great power, a power I believe can be used to fix the moon. Does he sense the Spring Maiden power? She thought to herself as she kept herself composed. Why do you care about the moon? It's been that way for thousands of years. Because it's my home. Her eyes widened as he said his piece. Raven nearly choked as she processed the words. Her eyes widened as her mouth all but hung. You're from the moon? How could any living creature survive on the moon? He merely nodded before going for another sip. It was far too casual, as far as she could tell, he wasn't lying. She encountered beings like the Grimm goddess, a man that defied death, magic, yet here she was. She shouldn't be surprised, yet here she was. She fixed her mouth, her eyes softening with intrigue. So you lived on the moon? Indeed. He spoke with nostalgia in his voice. And you believe I have the power to help you fix it? She replied, intrigued. Well, not just yours, 4 other powers, in tandem with yours, can restore my home. He finished to her immediate shock and worry. 4? So it wasn't a coincidence. He's talking about the maidens. No, he said, in tandem with my? Is he implying 5 then? Who could be the 5th, unless it was her or Ozpin, but does he know about that? No, how does he know of the others? And if so, why 5? Unless, she contemplated as she sipped more tea. Toneri took this opportunity to sip some more, leaving a peaceful, honest sort of silence among the two. Raven contemplated her next words, before she sighed, putting the cup down. The powers of which you speak are known as maidens, and I am what is known as the Spring Maiden. It's an ancient magic, deeply rooted in the very fabric of this world. It controls the seasons, the weather, and the very essence of life itself. Spring Maiden. I have never heard of such a thing. I'm not surprised, she humored as she stared at him. Weighing the options of her next question, he was too stoic. It was getting to the point it was difficult to read him again. You mentioned you thought this was a world called Earth. It could be conjecture, but this next question will allow me know exactly who you are, Toneri. Toneri, not to sound rude or anything, but how old are you? His face morphed into a curious look. I guess, I am 10,035 years old, or around that. I think, it's been a long time. He's definitely the one. No, it doesn't add up. Ozpin said they abandoned humanity and the dark god cratered the moon as they abandoned the world. Why would one of them be living on the moon? Unless it was to observe, but then they hadn't really abandoned Remnant, have they? Would she have noticed it? No, the real question was why did he think the world was called Earth? Unless that's what it was called in ancient times, but Ozpin never mentioned such a detail. Raven pondered within seconds as she reached for her cup. I see. She went right to drinking her tea before attempting to shoot another question. That was until Toneri interrupted her. This magic you speak of, it sounds remarkably similar to chakra. Have you ever heard of chakra? Raven raised an eyebrow. Chakra? No, I don't think I've heard of such a thing. Is that what you call your powers? Not exactly, it is simply the energy I channeled to perform such techniques. The techniques themselves were known as ninjutsu in my time, however, I guess you could just call them nature transformations. Raven had watched Toneri channel his chakra before. At first she thought it was ancient magic, however, the more she remained by his side, the more power she could feel emanating from him, and it was different from anything she had ever encountered before, aura or magic. She couldn't get much out of him before on their way to the camp, but now it's my turn to ask questions. She resolved herself as she nodded. Sounds fair. Have you ever heard of the Otsutsuki clan? No, I have never heard of them. She replied dryly as she reached for the ornate kettle. I see. He sighed, perhaps it was too forward. Perhaps history such as that was lost to time. I still don't sense an Otsutsuki, and I've been here for close to a day. Maybe I'm overthinking all this. They might not be here. No, I'll keep my guard up just in case. Better safe than sorry. Toneri thought to himself. I do know of the brother gods. Hagoromo and Hamura? He asked confusingly, trying to probe for information. Silence. She leaned forward slightly. Who? Very interesting. She giggled afterward as she peered through a seer, seeing the interaction. A man without sight, with skin so white it made him stand out amongst the clouds in the skies, a savior to the victims of the Bronwyn. It reminded her of the gods of old, one of light. And he apparently held a personality, not the kind like she remembered in the past. Maybe this was simply how he looked, she didn't recall him supposedly being blind. If it even was that same foolish god. Lionheart informed her, over a decade ago the Spring Maiden was lost in the forest of Anima. None of her subjects ever caught the huntress. Raven knows of the maidens, that she can be sure of. That cunning wretch was much adept at fleeing as she was in battle. A warrior with the heart of a coward. It didn't take much for her to deduce the maiden could be among the Bronwyn tribe. She had suspected before it was that Vernal girl. And perhaps it could still be. Whoever Toneri was seeking out, it must be one of them. It all lined up too well for it to not make sense. However, what else could he be looking for if not the maidens? You're certainly a mystery, she muttered. Unless the gods have come back to finish what they started, then she could get her revenge, but the time wasn't now. So what does Toneri's presence mean in the face of the infamous Bronwyn of Anima? Ah, it makes sense now. A small smirk crawled upon her grim features. She wasn't exactly sure who or what Toneri was, but she was certain of how to bring the Spring Maiden out of hiding. Let's see who the Spring Maiden is, Bronwyn. So let me get this straight. You were defending the planet from your evil celestial cousin 10,000 years ago when he sealed you? Quote, yes. On the moon? Yes. And you were awake that entire time? Yes. That must have been terrible for you. I couldn't even imagine. I'm okay, Raven. What's done is done. Are you? Yes. Annoyance crept into his voice. Ah. They sat in a comfortable silence as Toneri went for another sip, only to find he was out of tea. You need some? Raven interjected. Yes, please. He replied politely as he held out the cup for her. Raven poured the tea in a swift and quick motion, before a soft clank landed upon the table. How do you intend on finding the other maidens? She asked with skepticism in her voice. I can sense them the same way I found you. However, I would prefer if I could bring you with me. So I can help guide you? Indeed, I am unfamiliar with the current state of the maidens and the world. Your guidance will be crucial. Especially for those strange creatures. I see, and if I decide to say no? Raven went over in her head how depending on Toneri's reaction to her question it would decide if she goes along with helping him. Then I'll find the others myself. He replied simply. Raven's eyes narrowed as she assessed Toneri's resolve. And what guarantee do I have that this isn't some ploy? That you won't betray us once you've achieved your goal? You have my word, Toneri said solemnly. I seek only to restore what was lost and to ensure the safety of both. Toneri. He stood up instantly, Raven along with him, her hand on the hilt of her sword. The voice resounded in his head as he looked ominous, worried for once. The village, he replied with a level of urgency she never heard from him. His robe stirred gently before he blasted right through the ceiling. Wood and fabric fell to the influence of gravity as the sound of the wind shredding his wake made its way to her ears. The table had lifted and fallen swiftly, the kettle and cup that fell with it weren't so lucky. Before she knew it, he was gone, into the sky, the tent falling apart in his wake as parts fell from above. A shocked look painted her face with a wide-eyed expression. So fast, I couldn't even perceive his speed. Raven collected in awe. Vernal ran up to her. Chieftain. The words snapped her out of her stupor. Her thoughts danced in her mind. This was too coincidental for her. She might be onto them. Vernal. Tell the camp to be ready. I'm following him. Vernal had a look of withheld horror. Behind her eyes were filled with worry. But she chose to have faith in her leader as she leapt out the camp. He flew as fast as he could, so fast, so without thought. The area around his body burned from the speed from which he moved. In under a minute of hearing the cry, he appeared over the town, only to find an ominous sight that failed to him. Beings without energy, the same, no similar to that chakra-less bear. Only there were others, black raven-like birds flying around the town, bipedal wolves the size of humans, if not a little bigger. They shared the same characteristics, he couldn't sense them normally except for the pressure they gave off. I should have asked Raven what you things are. No matter. He felt his chakra fuming and boiling. A particularly disgusted look outlined his features as he looked down, almost daring to open his eyelids in justified anger. This time was different from before. He almost always had to hold back, but now was different. These had no chakra, and these things had no aura. That meant he could finally go all out. I won't let you hurt these innocent people. There were 20 of the chakra-less beasts, all capable of flight. Titanic in size, they easily dwarfed the village buildings with their claws and feathers. They approached in the formation of an arrow, akin to birds during migration, poised to attack him at the perfect moment. So these things do have intelligence, he thought, a tiny smile rising to his face as the memories of battle made its way into his muscles. The first bird made a horrid squeak sound, loud enough to paralyze a normal human. But not him. Whipping its head, it opened its maw to crush him under its might. The bird was easily larger than him, capable of swallowing him whole twice over. It gave a mighty final scream of defiance as he flew straight through it, its body mending under the velocity of the impact. The corpse glided down, disintegrating into dust from the impact as the sound of its screech roared across the sky. The other sky beasts took reference of this and adjusted themselves, instead, preparing themselves to fire off a volley of feathers instead of charging at him. Toneri, unimpressed, picked up speed suddenly, turning into a blazing white blur as he penetrated through the skyline. An audible sonic boom sent the birds flying back and onto the at a most unnatural speed from where they were impacted by the shockwave of sound. Their bodies crashing into the ground and collapsing various buildings upon impact. It was swarmed by all manner of monstrous animal-like entities, ranging from snakes to bipedal wolves and golems. It was like when he had first come to Earth for Hinata, bearing spectacle to all the birds and wildlife of the elemental nations. Then he was on a mission for the sake of his people's will, but now he was of his own purpose. The town was swarmed by monstrous entities, snakes, bipedal wolves, and golems. Toneri directed his chakra, creating a current of sharp winds. With a stoic expression, he put out his hand, pulling the monsters into a vacuum and blasting them away from the building. Their bodies smashed into other buildings or left marks on the ground where they landed. Taking advantage of the chaos, he flew through a window into the camp. He immediately identified the threats, snake-like creatures slithering towards Lycoris and the villagers. With his bare hands, he speared through them down within seconds, the sounds of skin and bone breaking merging together into an awful sound making those around them cringe. Lycoris, the only huntsman in action, could barely comprehend Toneri's speed. He moved like a video being sped up. By the time Toneri had arrived to everyone else, the Grimm had slumped over in vain. Toneri. Maggie ran up and hugged him. The boy, Kenta, ran up as well but a bit more hesitantly. He had longer, wavy hair with the hair spiking along the end of them. He didn't react for a second, but then he placed a hand over both of them, a tiny smile gracing his features. The grandfather converged closer to him. Thank the gods. Shoot, Toneri. I almost, fuck? Price lowered his weapon with a terror-filled tremble, his eyes on the verge of crying from the intensity of the situation. Price. Toneri directed his body in the young man's direction. Please do not curse in front of the children. It's uncouth. He nodded shakily before Toneri turned in Lycoris's direction. You're not hurt? It was Lycoris's turn. He walked up to him with a hesitant and steeled look, breathing heavily all the while with a labored sort of shake. Scars adorned his body as his outfit was in tatters. I'm not. I can see everyone else is fine as well, except you. I'll be fine. My aura is still up. But we have bigger problems. It feels like we're surrounded. He looked up, trying to get some of his breath back, scars adorning his body. Your instincts are true. We are surrounded, he replied, his voice steady but urgent. Lycoris breathed in and out steadily, hoping for a joke. But seeing Toneri's seriousness, he groaned audibly. My aura hasn't even recovered yet. What do we do? My aura hasn't even recovered yet. What do we do? Stay behind and rest, have them secured somewhere. I'll take care of these creatures. Raven will be here shortly for backup, so you need not worry about me. Lycoris wanted to protest but held his tongue. This same man had defeated the Bronwyn tribe single-handedly. And now he was speaking of Raven Bronwyn as an ally? Tell me, is she actually trustworthy or is she tricking you? If she's tricking me, I'll kill her myself. That's comforting, most of the survivors thought to themselves. And you're not tired? At all? Lycoris lessened his tiredness with a slightly annoyed tone. You've been active all day. You dealt with Raven, let alone the horde outside. Aren't you low on aura? My reserves are much greater than any human, rest assured, you all will survive today, and all these monsters will meet a fitting end. He patted the two kids' heads, motioning them off him with a gentle nudge. And then I'll be back. Promise. Maggie had bags under eyes. She looked like someone fighting back a big yawn and collapsing on the spot. Kento was no better. When Toneri found him, his arm was broken and his home reduced to rubble. He also had bags under his eyes, although the boy's eyes seemed to wane and wander whenever he looked at him. Now Lycoris, go get wrapped up. He flew back through the destroyed door, floating over the floor covered with debris and glass. Only to be met with a veritable army of negativity, in between crevices and behind buildings and in trees and in the sky. Dots of nothingness covered the environment from his senses, including the tailed beast-esque energy running through the darkness. Its energy mistakable yet resilient in its purpose, blown through the beasts as they were split in twain and burnt to ashes. His smile wavered into neutrality before he rocketed towards the threat. It was too quick. She was sure the Grimm would attack the village. It was normal after one of her raids. The despair generated made the Grimm move swiftly. At some point Toneri would rush to defend it. As the self-proclaimed guardian, he did not disappoint. At first she was scared he was the god of light, that the apocalypse was at hand and she somehow would be the first one to go. Though it would make sense, considering all she's done. But upon dissecting the situation presented to her, getting to actually know the blind wraith, Toneri was different. An ancient being from the moon that uses a unique kind of magic called chakra. It felt similar in essence to magic, but magic was tied to the earth itself. Chakra seemed almost alien by comparison. It was somehow natural, yet it also wasn't. She wasn't sure what to make of it. More so it could be an advanced application of magic, to the extreme it could be considered its own term. She found herself disappointed at the prospect of him not being one of the gods, but she settled with the idea he could something similar to them, a sort of celestial entity that's come to help, as he so claimed. But by who? The Otsutsuki. It was a strange name to be sure, but it was as alien as it was divine. Regardless of whether it was fate or not, he was here now, and he was helping ordinary civilians like this was some sort of fairy tale conjured up by Ospin's past. Same as her. If it were so, then her family would be destroyed. Perhaps not just the Bronwyn tribe but also whatever master he served. If he served a master, she was sure she would make sure the tribe would be well off. That they would be safe. That's it? The words echoed across the destroyed landscape of the town. He sighed with a hint of irritation. I should be grateful the opportunity presented itself at all, but they were far too weak, he thought in contemplation, before his musing became interrupted. A silent stir aroused his ire, before the ground suddenly erupted. A hand made of rock collapsed over him, in an attempt to trap him between its hold. The masked creature swerved its head around before it suddenly realized he didn't get him. The mask consisted of a bone plate with markings carved onto it, as well as a single eye that darted around the shattered street. In that split second of retrospection, the monster saw the target, and was promptly carved through with the palm of man's pale hand. It shuddered horribly, black goo falling out of it and onto the bed as the rocks surrounding it faded, its mask falling to pieces with almost a sightful wail over his hand. He took his hand back, noticing some black goo. He shoved it away off his hand and robe. I should move on. It would be better if he didn't act disappointed, but this time he felt almost compelled to. It was denied of him for so long and now he got to experience it again. It was just, too tame. Perhaps, no, was I vengeful? Over what? It wasn't even a fight, to join the fight? He stared at his hands in a deep sort of contemplation, his senses zoning out as he focused. Failure to your people. You don't deserve your namesake. Disgrace of the moon. You're not even a full-blooded god. Toneri? He felt himself shaken, and suddenly he flinched. Was this Raven? Oh, it was. What just happened? You look tired. I am fine, he insisted with a tone unlike the one he used to command people, or when he was in private. He seemed shaken. Raven took note of this. There are no more Grimm here. We need to go back to the camp, she replied with newfound urgency. What's wrong? They're in danger. The wooden logs that once acted as walls were strewn about, split in half and scattered across the clearing. Tents lay flattened, with the smell of blood and feces thick in the air. The tents that once withheld life were scattered and flattened, with the smell of blood and feces running thick through the air. Toneri stretched his senses out, but found no disturbances. He had found he couldn't sense the monsters directly, only their physical movements. Placing himself just outside the destroyed front gate to the camp, Raven appeared at his side in moments, a small hint of a flame appearing in her eyes as she scanned the remnants of her home. I don't sense the things that could have done this. They must be long gone already. The beasts must have come in swiftly and killed everyone while we were gone. I underestimated their intelligence. No, the coordination. This was planned, but by the beast? His eyebrows rose upwards. He expanded his senses back onto the village specifically. None were still there. With that sigh, he lessened his guard a little, but not his vigilance. She flew from the tree line, popping out with the leaves exploding in her wake as she jutted through it and into the clearing, and landed on the dirt, swiftly moving into the camp, observing the destruction with wide eyes. Never, in my wildest nightmares? She gazed around at the carnage in a lost stupor. The sound of wood falling made her flinch and look. It was so silent, yet so loud amongst it all. No, there's still survivors, very few and injured, but she cut him off as she ran into the camp looking for survivors. He followed after, helping her move around the debris. After a few long minutes, they had cleared out the camp. There were 3 survivors out of the dozens who had inhabited it: Vernal, Ray, and Pot. Raven knew they were the only ones in the tribe proficient in fighting with aura. She wasn't surprised they were still alive, though injured. Toneri healed their wounds quickly, but the damage had been done. This was all her. The Bronwyn tribe was no more. The group had momentarily situated themselves by a large tree near the remains of the Bronwyn camp. Ray and Pot looked over their weapons. Ray held a shadow over his features while Pot seemed to be aggressive with some of the supplies. Or what was left of them. They had salvaged a world map, a few scrolls, and some drinkable water, as well as a few weapons, none of them too noteworthy in her eyes. Raven was leaning against a nearby tree, looking down with closed eyes with a contemplative look. Her hair slightly rattled more than it already had been before. Her hands shook as she tried desperately to maintain herself. Raven, the female voice walked up to her from where the former chieftain swayed, her ruby eyes glaring at the voice. Vernal. She met her eyes. Vernal stared her down, before Raven stood up completely to meet her gaze. The two looked at each other with a deadlocked expression. The silence stretched. Raven anticipated this and weathered her expression accordingly. Vernal was her subordinate, how she held a stoic blank look to her features. "Why did you leave?" she uttered with a soft sort of tone, but firm enough for Raven to realize its hints. "If I didn't," she didn't dare glance in the direction of Toneri's departure to ruins, as she assessed her words. "The tribe would have been in danger of who? Salem? Is that why you brought him? If it was to protect us, why did you both leave at the almost perfect time for a Grimm attack? An alpha attack at that," she urged violently. "It decimated us. If it weren't for me, Ray and Pot would probably be dead. And everyone else is dead." Raven closed her eyes. "I did what I felt was right." "How do you know he isn't working with her?" "Because this is his first time ever arriving on Remnant." Vernal's eyes widened at this. "So he's an alien now?" she replied half dubiously despite her own personal theories. Before Raven continued, "Perhaps so, he's more powerful than me and maybe even her. We need him. And we needed you too." Raven sighed again. "I had faith you could take care of them. Clearly I was wrong, you weren't ready." "No, that's not what I was talking about. You said you wanted to stay out of all this, with Salem and Ozpin. Yet you killed the Spring Maiden and took her power, painting a target on not just yours, but my back also, and now you have this alien god? This will make us formidable, a chance to defeat her." Raven replied back with the same confident and authoritative tone. Vernal eyes darted into a glare as the second passed them. "A chance for you to defeat her, but what about the rest of us mortal beings? I can't command the elements. You know it was an Alpha-class Ursa that attacked us? How do you think she did it?" "I know the fuck how it did." Pot chimed in, walking over to the duo with slow steps, anger painted on his face. "Pot, come on, don't do this now." Ray attempted to calm him to no avail. No. Fuck that. I trusted you. We trusted you. And you just abandoned us." "I did no such thing." But you fucking did. For what? A power advantage over someone who's been alive for apparently thousands of years? Pot, that's enough. Vernal placed her hand on his shoulder tightly. He shook under her grip. Get off of me. He pushed her away. Vernal looked back at him with an annoyed glare. You never even had a plan, did you? What's the point in surviving when we have a death goddess actually riding after us? It was only a matter of time, and look what happened. You weren't going to stay away. Shit. I thought it could stay the same. Well, I guess was a fucking idiot for that. Pot calmed down, but he remained panting as he let go of his balled-up fist, leaving them to dangle by his sides in defeat. I take full responsibility. Perhaps I should have stayed, but right now I'm intent on getting you all to safety so you can get some proper rest. Vernal looked at her, bracing herself as her mouth opened, her eyes steeled and poised as her hands gripped their leather pants. Ray saw the look. Raven, suddenly Ray came between both of them. Okay, I think that's not so bad. He glared at both of them to shut their mouths. Pot seemed especially agitated, but Ray calmed him down with just a look. We have a lot to talk about, but not here. A small silence descended upon them, the sounds of the foliage as the wind came through. Raven couldn't help but take a glance at Toneri as he returned, a scarred woman's body in his arms. I suggest we leave now. Nothing but death remains here. He walked over to the 3 remaining tribe members. Raven eyeing the body he held. She's not from the tribe, is she alive? No, she's not from the tribe. Yes, she's alive. I believe her friends deserve closure. In his mind he thought of flying them there, but upon registering the way their faces moved and shifted, and some of the sound from before. Even as a blind god, he saw the need for a long-trodden road back to safety. As such, he chose to say nothing, raising his hand and raising the various bags they had collected to store the things they need and have, from food to spare scrolls, and walked ahead. Vernal walked forward first, Pot following soon after. Ray moved to walk but stopped to look back at the camp he had stayed at for years, before turning around. Raven glanced back, seeing fleeting spirits of the past, before tearing her sight away and flanking the group. Leaving the god covering the front, and the maiden Bronwyn in the back. A commanding voice shook them out of their mental haze. We're here, he announced the familiar broken gates of Tasuki village. Walking forward the debris and past the ash, Raven looked onto it with a glint, while Toneri just walked ahead, the trio of the Bronwyn survivors not far behind. The journey to Tasuki village was wrought with nothing more than boredom. With each step, the tension remained palpable as Raven remained behind everyone, mostly to look out for Grimm, but to also just think. Even at the gates, the ashen stench of the end seemed ever pungent in air, even as the sun began to set. Its darkish hue painting the sky as if the great depths of the ocean began reflecting the cosmos. Toneri could tell the sun has begun setting as the temperature took a slight yet ever noticeable dip from pale skin. Raven walked forward in an effort to catch up to Toneri. Good now. Raven. Vernal cut her off, stepping forward. Pot looked up with an intrigued sort of look, like an eager child. While Ray seemed to look sick by comparison, yet he still maintained a disciplined look. She stopped. She looked back to her, meeting her eyes. Vernal. Toneri didn't need to look. He just continued looking forward with shut eyes, making sure the body he was toting was comfortable in his arm, as he admired the wind as it rustled against his body gently. What of the tribe? Her voice seemed to stretch out eerily as she kept her tone neutral, even as her voice shook. Raven looked at her in silence. Toneri found himself slightly confused at the question. Toneri, I'll catch up with you. He looked towards the direction of her voice contemplatively, his face unyielding. He fixed the body over him as he began floating, before zooming over the destroyed buildings at a recognizable pace, not too fast where the body would be harmed. Leaving Bronwyn and her subordinates. She let the silence stew, the stare intensified as her eyes remained unwavering. Pot looked at Ray. Ray was making a gesture to be quiet, before Pot looked back to Raven. I wish it weren't so, as would any leader. I know I've failed you all. She let her words linger, her eyes shadowing over the 3 people. But I did what I felt was right for the tribe, even if it was its undoing, but instead of looking to the past for answers, I'll look to the future for a new. No, she cut her off. Excuse me? She replied slightly offended. Vernal just looked at her. Her hands twitched ever so slightly before she sighed. No, if you truly cared about the Bronwyn tribe, you would have come back as soon as Grimm attacked, you would have buried their bodies. Instead you just left them out there to rot. So this is it then? You're going to stay with him, right? You know, as well as I, he is the future of humanity. Vernal held a blank expression at that, but Raven could see past it. It gave its way to what she considered her family, and when a child does something inexplicable, so be it. She approached a bag, checking it to make sure it had the necessary resources. She took out the scroll and booted up, looking at the screen before turning it off and sliding it into her butt pocket. The young adult picked up the bag and turned her back to Raven, looking at Ray and Pot, both looking towards her now with varying expressions. The Bronwyn tribe is dead. You can choose to stay with her, but I'm done running, I'm done killing for the sake of living. Her feet carried her away and past the duo. Vernal, where do you think you're going? Vernal ignored Raven. Vernal. She stopped, not even daring to look back at her former leader. It's not safe around you. Not as you are. I'm done. Thank you for everything. She turned away for the last time and continued walking. Yeah, I think I like the sound of that, Pot said, picking up another bag and without thinking, following her. Ray looked between Pot and Raven, alarmed. This. He steadied his breathing, as Raven had taught him. Sure, I guess. He turned away but paused to look at Raven. Thanks for taking care of us. As kids, we couldn't have survived without you, so thank you. I will never forget about you. Raven remained silent before nodding at him. After that, he turned his back as well, joining the others. They too began behind Vernal. The three seemed like brilliant lights before they flicker and die. Raven looked at their fleeting forms, the imperceptible glint of her memories with it. She saw vestiges of a rose and a mighty man, along with someone she had grown up with. She wanted to say something, but at that point there was no reason to. They had made their decision, and she was proud of them for it, even if it hurt as much as it did all those years ago. She, too, didn't enter the city. The wires sparked on the table as he pressed a metal rod to them, carefully connecting it to the scroll. A single rubber glove covered his hand as he worked, sweat glistening down his neck. He had been sitting there for the past hour, trying to hack the last functional scroll using parts from a broken one belonging to the bedridden huntress. He had gotten it and decided to try and fix it, despite his absolute inexperience. Please, for the love of the heavens and the seas, let this thing work. He went to turn the scroll on, waiting for a minute as it went through its boot-up sequence. The scroll lighting up the tent. Okay. He got to the app screen and after waiting a few seconds. No data detected. Motherfucker. Welp, I tried. He slapped his forehead so loud it made an impact sound. A girl walked into the room steadily, her sword up and ready in a professional style befitting a huntress, her face as serious as when he met her. What's wrong? No, it's the scroll. He stood up, rubbing his eyes. Tried to hotwire the data from the busted one to this one so I could get its data and try to shoot off something to the nearest radio wave and hopefully piggyback it all the way to Mistral CCT tower. Or something like that. No luck, I suppose? She mused with a soft yet forced smile. Glad it's nothing too serious. Nothing, you suppose you weren't taught how to hotwire a scroll? He looked towards her. Unfortunately, no. I'm sure my teammate remembered though. She replied with a hint of pain in her voice. He sighed loudly, too tired to truly take it all in. I need a break anyway, I've been sitting for too long. He felt something enter his hand, a plum. Food. She started off towards the opening. Thanks. He put the fruit on the table, but away from the electronics, before looking at her. Hey, huntress? She looked back at him and stopped. Can I be like you someday? The huntress looked at the wall curiously, like it was the most entertaining thing at that moment. A huntsman? Dawn scanned him up and down. No. Hell no, I value my life, thank you. I meant like, become strong. You already are. Huh? You said you didn't think you could do it, yet here you are still. That's real strength, kid. The most experience I have is fixing a power outage one time, and turning computers on and off. Not much of a strength. She gave him a curious glance, before scoffing. I wouldn't lie to you like that, kid. It's the fact you haven't given up, is why I think you're strong. I kinda don't get it. He muttered as he looked back at the scroll in progress. That feels too narcissistic to just say, especially when I've never really worked out before. Perhaps, she mutters before looking down, a more contemplative look coming over her face. The Mistral CCT tower has people that keep track of villages like this each day. If they don't respond, they'll send out a highly rated huntsman group or the military within the week to check on them. The teenager rubbed his eyes. What are you? Wait, so we're all right actually. As long as we don't attract more Grimm? Does everyone else know? Probably. Why do you think they haven't been panicking? They know someone will come for them. Besides, Tasuki village is fairly big. I doubt its disappearance will go unnoticed. Honestly, I'm surprised the Bronwyn tribe attacked a place with this many people. She finished her speech as he looked at her as if she's grown a second head. You didn't know, did you? She giggled. Oh, of course I did. Okay. She held a nostalgic look in her face as she looked at Price, but to him it seemed so sorrowful by comparison. I'm sorry if I. No, you're fine, it's just, you remind me of a dear friend. Keep doing your best, and you'll get strong in your own way. Not everyone can be like Pyrrha. She looked into his eyes. Okay, wait, why am I getting communications up if help will come on its own? So they can come faster? She replied with sass. Ah, we're lucky Toneri was here, we definitely wouldn't have stood a chance without him. True, he yawned. Fine, okay, I understand. His eyes landed on hers. The eye contact stunned him a bit as he stared right back. Only to look away with a slight blush. She walked back to the door with a small giggle. Also, have a little more faith in yourself. With that, she left the tent. HMPH. Stupid huntress. He went and took a bite out of the plum. Guess I don't really have anything better to do really, but what's the point if? A memory came to his mind as he looked at the scroll in progress. Price was it? My name is Toneri. I heard you were adequate in sending messages. I need you to send a message to a city or another town for support. Toneri had said to him when he first met him, with his unkempt bleached hair and a stoic, yet firm look to him that gave off a sense of regal nobility, unlike which seen from videos of the Schnees, but from something that operated on a different level. After a few minutes, he looked at the scroll in progress. I can do this. He finished the plum, cracked his fingers, his neck, his jaw, his feet, his hips, and his legs. I can do this. As he moved to sit down, sound obscured his senses. Huh? He peeked out the entrance, seeing Dawn, her hand resting gently on the weapon on her hip. Ready for an altercation. Oh shit. Stay behind me. He nodded along with her words. Looking at the broken door to the miniature camp set up in the hall, was Toneri, numerous bags floating behind him as he floated in. Dawn seemed to settle down at that, so did Lycoris. Toneri however looked in her direction. Why are you walking? You should be resting. I am. You restored my aura and my body, I heal the rest. Don't be modest. Please, rest. No. My aura is fine, I don't need to rest anymore. What do you mean you don't need to rest anymore? The sun had completely set, with the shattered moon adorning the sky. A sight she could never get enough of. A reminder of the blind god's existence. That such a being was real, that such a being needed her assistance, despite being so much stronger. He hadn't sought to force her either, instead prioritizing the civilians. The fire cackled before her as she rested, a blank look on her face as she stared blankly at the dancing flames. Those Grimm were far too powerful for just that town, and Vernal described an Alpha Ursa attacking the camp. Not even a group, just one. She felt a pang, a shiver like a breath of frosty air, run through her spine as she gripped the marks of her sword. It was all too familiar, similar yet different from when she left them. Stirred up old feelings. She got up with a vengeance, unsheathing Omen with a ferocity she hadn't felt since she was a child. Glaring into the darkness, her eyes seemed to glow with a foreboding power as each breath remained heaved. Before she let go of her sword, the man seemed to glow in the darkness, his face with perfect clarity. It was like looking at the moon, like marble from a mountainside, the same stoic look plastered as if nothing ever happened. Toneri. Raven, his hands were up in a surrender position from behind the tree before he politely moved out of the shadows and closer to the camp. I come in peace. Putting her weapon back into its sheath. She kept her sword at her side, knelt down, and crossed her legs as she closed her eyes. He felt the heat of the dancing flames, his knees bent gently as he placed himself against the ground, his ninja footwear gracing the ground with little to no wasted movement. The final posture took on as he looked at the fire, his hands resting on his thighs respectfully with his poised out, like he was some sort of priest. Like a creature out of myth, every move he made, every gesture, felt practiced, thought, and realized to an almost astral extent. All the while, Raven stared at him with an unwelcoming expression, But at this moment she truly got the chance to give him a proper look over. He looked human enough, but she noticed the black sash around his hips despite the robe and the pale greenish sash beneath the robes from where his hands sat. She could see black fingerless gloves underneath from where the robe would otherwise conceal it, and the ninja sandals as well. Such footwear, she couldn't imagine such a thing on such a being, yet here he was. Then she glanced at his exposed skin, strange symbols that looked almost tattooed on his transparently pale skin, shaped like an upside-down number 6. Adorned just underneath the clavicle. The importance of such a thing fleeted her, but considering his divine nature, it was something gravely important to Toneri. Or potentially related to her and Ozpin, to the gods that created Remnant. It was as if he was carved out of marble directly, there were no cuts, bruises, abnormalities, or even acne. Like he was ripped straight out of a cartoon or comic book. Despite everything she'd seen out of him, he didn't look like a warrior. She wondered how such a being learned to fight, how he operated, how he even lived. A reminder of his words, about beings such as the Sage of the Six Paths, or the Sage of the Heavenly Verth, how they might be related to the brother gods, but with her own information, she was hard-pressed to assume such a thing. It made her think. The two sat in retrospective silence, before Toneri punctured the silence. How do you feel? I'm fine. That's obviously a lie. How do you know? Because I know what it's like to lose them. To fail at protecting something so sacred, so close. I'm sure you do, she replied sarcastically. Thank you, he replied innocently. The fire continued. So you had a family? What were they like? She asked curiously. She hadn't realized someone like him knew such an earthly ideal. They fought a lot, all the time even. I now see that it was a mistake as it ultimately led to their demise. But I remember my father the most, as a patient person. However, he was so stubborn it led to his end. He was killed? Raven asked curiously with a piercing look. No, he passed away, leaving me as the last survivor of the clan. Raven sat in silence. She wanted to ask what happened to the rest of them, a clan of people like him. Maybe his people were the ones to leave the moon as it is now. Should I ask? If you want to. Toneri waved his hands. Raven looked back at the fire for a minute, the silence stricken with the sound of the jumping flames. I won't pry. It's none of my business. Toneri couldn't help but let out a small smile at the comment. Thank you, and, pry? Raven just stared at him for a few seconds in thought. Think of it as a door, one I won't pry open. Ah, he replied. The understanding washed over him. How simple. If only it were. The fire began to die down ever so slightly. Toneri motioned to grab more wood, however he stopped as he observed Raven's form. Her head was still like rock, but her body gesture had noticeably relaxed. My own old man was stubborn as well, you know? Really now? Indeed, he was the former head of the tribe. May I ask what happened to him? He was killed. I see. May he find peace in. No need for all that. She leaned forward a bit. When old age befell him, he was killed by the previous leader before me. Then when I returned and learned of what had happened, I killed him in turn. Such as it was, the strong thrive, and the weak perish, she finished. And you believe that? I used to. She looked back at the dimmed fire with. Then I won't pry. It's none of my business. Raven looked at Toneri, who was now looking at her. She chuckled softly. She placed a hand over her mouth as she fought back a yawn. I appreciate that. You should get some rest. No. I need to be alert. No need. I'll cover for you. I do not require as much sleep as you do. Really now? Indeed. Just be prepared to tell me all about this death goddess when you wake up. Her blood ran cold at the mention. I suppose I will have to. I suppose so. He reached into his robe and pulled out an apple before tossing it to her. She promptly caught it and eyed it for a second. Was that just in your robe? Yeah, the village folk wouldn't let me leave without some sort of food. How generous. Indeed, good night. Raven. She laid against the tree. Good night, Toneri. Raven finally took Omen off her lap, her muscles relaxing. She blew the fire away with an icy breeze before laying down at the base of the tree, resting her head against the bark and keeping her sword at her side in case of anything or anyone. Toneri simply laid on the branch and motioned his head upwards. Thinking about the final reincarnation of Asura and his squabbles with Indra's future lives, about Hinata's words. I was prepared to muse you as to why you adopted such a frail worldview, but I see you're already starting to move past that. Perhaps I was a little harsh on you, Spring Maiden, even humans of your caliber can exhibit honorable traits and growth. And then some. Despite the death and the failure, a small part of him felt genuine freedom, excitement at everything he had seen. Humanity, even when it reverts to their baser tendencies, evolves regardless. It makes no sense, but then again neither did Naruto. Or his father. He mused aloud with a smile on his face as he read the stars in the sky, his voice filled with a newfound wonder. Father, you were right, I should have come to this planet sooner. The dark halls of the Grimm castle echoed with an unsettling silence, the only sound being the distant growl of various hellish monsters waiting for any living thing not sanctioned by the Great One to emerge. In the heart of this ominous fortress, her piercing red eyes reflected the flickering torchlight and stained church glass where echoes of various voices roamed within. Her gaze sat at her seer as she mentally replayed the fight over and over again, observing each minute detail of the blind god. Each step he took with the fluid movement of a seasoned dancer, each attack calculated and executed with the force of a mountain. He was the most skilled fighter she had ever seen, perhaps more so than Ozma in his prime. Appearing from the sky like some creature from myth, he had done more than momentarily pause her plans. She looked, and her smirk remained. She could see it, maybe that coward Raven had seen it too, but he was no god of light, no god of darkness. What did that make him? Perhaps he could be related to them, but if so, why send a messenger? Why seek out the Spring Maiden? Is it the gods attempting to reclaim their lost energy? If so, what did that make Toneri exactly? Some sort of battery? No, a messenger, even that didn't line up with what they would do, what they did. Too many questions, too few answers. No matter. Red mist piled out of the seer on the table in front of her, her hands clasping as her face remained ever lifeless. Tyrion, Hazel, Watts, my goddess. The pale man bowed eagerly yet dramatically. Hazel bowed in a great showing of his loyalty, kneeling down in a dutiful manner. Watts placed a hand over his heart, revering his head in respect. The situation has changed, Salem began, her tone grave. Tyrion, you no longer need to concern yourself with the hunt for the Spring Maiden. In fact, I have a new goal for you and Watts. Hazel will continue reducing the huntsmen of Mistral. Of course. Hazel nodded. And what about me? Tyrion replied with a reverent snarl. I too am curious about this new complication. Watts interjected swiftly with intrigue as he stroked his mustache. It has come to my attention that Raven is the Spring Maiden, and she has a new ally, an unknown entity by the name of Toneri. He holds as much power, if not more, than a maiden. Do not attempt to fight him or her. Understood? Tyrion's eyes widened with manic glee. Yes, but if the man is as powerful as you suspect then. Suspect and knowing are two very different things, Kalos. You will track them and nothing more. Yes, my queen. The pieces were in motion, and the game had just become more complex. She would not let anything derail her plans. The fall of Beacon was just the beginning, the world will follow, and so will this supposed god. As it is unlikely he will hear her out, if he's truly sided with Raven. Then he's sided with Ozma and his followers. But if that were to be so, then both the knight and bishop will be at her heel in the new world. The ever-looming potential of the gods' return weighing on her. They couldn't win. She knew they wouldn't come back unless all the relics were brought together, so that meant although divine. Toneri was not related to the god of darkness, nor the god of light. Watts adjusted his glasses, a thoughtful expression crossing his face before asking curiously. And me, mistress? I want you to meet with Spring Maiden and that blind god. That's all for now. If you enjoy, then please like, share and do comments.